I'm Nachiket Moore, and I want to welcome you to this webinar on a very important topic of community-based health insurance. And I have with me some outstanding panelists to help discuss and bring some of these issues to life. We have Madam Alamilu, who's the member non-life from IRDAI. She's really led a lot of innovations in IRDAI. Just before this call, we were discussing about the work IRDAI did on COVID-19 insurance. And really, it's quite remarkable how IRDAI, under her leadership, collaborating with the insurance industry in this crisis, was able to respond and at a very high speed, make sure that people experienced a lot of hardship, but to some extent, the financial aspects of it, if they could be ameliorated, I think that was a wonderful effort by IRDAI and Madam. We have Dr. Neeta Rao. She's a public health specialist, 16 plus years of experience, but has really led the innovations in health financing and trying to understand what are the ways in which we can use multiple instruments. And I'm sure we'll hear some more about that, particularly in the context of CBHI from her. And then we have Kumar Shelap, who is one of the pioneers in this notion of community-based health insurance, somebody who spent a number of years trying to understand the community, its needs, issues of financing. So we really have some very diverse perspectives that we can offer today in the discussion. So I'm certainly looking forward to hearing the views of people. Just to give you a little bit of background as to why we thought that this would be an interesting conversation to have. As we all know, we Indians, we spend about 10 lakh crore on healthcare per year. Insurance currently is about 5 to 6% of that total. About 10 times more, 62.5% is spent by individuals on an out-of-pocket basis. And even those that are insured, while they benefit from the insurance, no question, but it would be hard to say that their disease burden has been controlled, that primary care is being offered to them. You hear unfairly sometimes stories of conflicts between hospitals, insurers, consumers. There are serious concerns about irrational overuse, underuse by hospitals, and sometimes denial of claims that you experience. Now, why is this an important issue for us? Clearly, as all countries have done, India too needs to look at increased contributions from state governments and state government budgets as the main means of funding universal healthcare. In no country, people have achieved universal healthcare without substantial participation from government. But given where we are today, and given the fact that at least for the foreseeable future, the contribution from the government are likely to remain modest, insurance will have to play, commercial insurance will have to play a much larger role. My hope is that it will grow to 25, 30% of the overall market from the current level of 5 to 6%, and not over very long periods, but over next 5 to 7 years. Now, there are three sources of value loss that I think need to be addressed if we are to get to this number. One, very high distribution costs by the traditional insurer broker channels. This makes insurance products quite expensive because you end up spending a fair amount of money on the channel itself rather than on the insurance product. Second, what I mentioned earlier, mismatches between providers, insurers, consumers. Is this covered? Is this not covered? How much is the cap? How much is not the cap? The residual burden coming back on consumers. And then, of course, consumers themselves making poor decisions regarding where they go, what they do with their own healthcare choices. The question before us in this panel is the role that something like community-based health insurance, very broadly, you can think of, and you will hear from the experts on what it is. But broadly, I would define it as a type of group insurance product. in which members of a close-knit community agree to share some risks between each other, use some type of health insurance product that they design on their own or sometimes in collaboration with insurers, and work with the providers to make sure that the community that is served by CBHIs gets a good experience. The question is this a solution to many of the challenges that I outlined? Let me begin by asking you, Dr. Rao, to give us a little bit of a sense, of what you think. From your position at USAID, you've looked at CBHIs from around the world. Do you see a role for CBHIs in the larger health system? How can they play a larger role in the Indian context? What factors do we need to take into consideration? And what are some of the challenges that CBHIs, as they expand, they would need to overcome? Over to you, Dr.
Thank you, Dr. Moore. Thank you for setting that context and for those questions. And good evening to everyone. I really look forward to listening more from this panel, learning from this panel while I share my perspectives. So Dr. Moore, as you mentioned, out of the total health expenditure, only 6% is accounted for by insurance. Now, it's very important to see what are these prepayment mechanisms and what do they cover? What kind of services do they cover? Who pays for these insurance and who are the ones who are covered for this? So a larger proportion of this entire prepayment mechanisms is actually from social health insurance and from the employer provided insurance. So largely it covers the government employees and their family members, and also the group insurance that is provided by the employers. So it leaves out the informal sector workers, the unorganized sector workers, those who are in small and micro enterprises, and also those who are self-employed or completely unemployed. Now, also let's look at, what's the proportion of the community-based health insurance in the total, health expenditure. So it's as minuscule as 0.01%. And what is worth noting is that over the 3 years from 2013-14 to 2016-17, this proportion has come down from 0.02% to 0.01%. So while it's a very, very small proportion, it's an important piece. And I think today's panel, we are going to discuss that in terms of how and why it is such an important piece. So if we look at who pays for these prepayment mechanisms, 46% of that comes from households. So it's the individuals who are paying out of pocket for the premiums for getting. Partially, some of them are paying along with the employers. Now, if we look at, for what are these, prepayment schemes covered, 75% of them are being spent for inpatient care, that is for hospitalization. And while from NSSO data, we clearly know that more than 70% of the expenditures which are made out of pocket at point of service is for outpatient care, medicines, investigation, transportation, etc., which is not covered under any insurance program. And then the important question is who are covered by these prepayment mechanisms? So this is just 20% of the entire population. So while there are, some varying figures from different sources, the fact is that less than 10% of low and middle income population are covered through any micro insurance programs. Now, evidence also suggests that out of all the different prepayment mechanisms or insurance programs, it's the community-based health insurance programs that covers primary care with preventive and promotive elements. And while we see now a lot of group insurance coverage actually caters, covers the outpatient care, but they are relatively to a very small proportion. And what is extremely important is that all of these community-based insurance actually have started from the needs of the community. So while we have a lot of community-based health insurance programs across the world, and the most developed ones we see in North America and in Europe, the fact is that if you look at the history, it started from 17th century, and it all came from the needs of the people. So it was like small groups of people like farmers or fishermen who did not meet the needs of the, where they couldn't meet the needs of their services. They actually formed a small group, and they actually created mutuals. Now, the whole concept of mutual also came because of the market failures in the insurance sector. So, and some of these problems are like, the commercial products were not able to cater to the needs of the communities. The premiums were too high. The claims process were very slow. And it was also very difficult for the community to trust the insurance companies because of lack of transparency and accountability. And one of the classic example I would like to quote here is Vimo Seva, where they had an insurance model, that is the risk that was transferred to an insurance company through the partner agent model. But because the loss of wages was not covered, they actually created a mutual for hospital cash benefits. Now, just for the benefit of the listeners, I just wanted to share that there are these three types of community-based health insurance. One is the partner agent model, where the risk of the community is transferred to an insurance company. The second model is the provider model, where the provider of healthcare provides for the risk, covers for the risk of the community. And the third one is mutual, where the community manages its own risk and does not transfer it to any insurance company. Now, it's only the partner agent model that is recognized as an insurance model, while the others are not. And therefore, there are a lot of challenges. But as I mentioned, both in terms of the needs, the community-based, the mutuals model actually cater to the needs of the community. Even if we look at the renewal rates, they are much higher among these community-based health insurance models. And one of the survey has shown that more than 79% people who are already covered under it are willing to pay more for additional services and products that meets their requirement. So overall, my perspective is that while this is community-based health insurance is a very small pie of the total healthcare financing, it has a very critical role to play because it caters to the requirements of the poor and the vulnerable population. And as you mentioned, during COVID, we have seen how it has impacted lives, and the financial protection is the least that one can think of providing. In terms of global experience, the mutuals and cooperatives and community-based organizations exist in over 70 countries. And data from 59 countries actually shows that there are about 5,000 mutuals which cover health elements for these different cooperatives. And it services about 81 million people. An estimated 43 countries have actually shown that they have their own health, the cooperatives have their own healthcare facilities like hospitals and medical centers. Cooperatives also have their own pharmacy, right from manufacturers to drug manufacturing to wholesalers to retail pharmacy. So there's this whole bunch of services that is being managed by cooperatives themselves. And very important aspect is that there is a lot of evidence to show that the mutual and the community-based health insurance programs actually target the poor better. There is a higher rate of utilization among those who are covered under these programs. And there is also better financial protection. So whether it is from Rwanda or from Niger, it has shown that the utilization rates have improved, and it has also reduced out-of-pocket expenditure and total health expenditures. And even Seva, I believe, has shown this data. Now, to your question on how can community-based health insurance play a role in the entire health system, my take is that it has to be complementary. It cannot be a standalone. The community-based health insurance can work very well with the government programs. The government provided health insurance program like the Pradhan Mantri Jan Arogya Yojana, which provides for hospitalization services. And what CBHIs could do is cover for the outpatient care with a strong preventive and promotive element of care. Now, what this does is it provides comprehensive healthcare services to the communities and also brings down the out-of-pocket expenditure as well as the total health expenditure. The other benefit of doing this is the government always wants to, has its programs which is targeted for the poor and the vulnerable population. But given the scale in which it works, it's extremely difficult to target it. So these CBHIs can actually take these services to the people. At the same time, the CBHIs would also help, would also get the economies of scale for risk diversification of their products. So the micro insurance products can actually reach out to the larger population by working with the government. This also means that, there could be a strategic purchasing model that could be developed where, certain packages could be developed with outpatient care, preventive, promotive element. They could be costed. And this is something that could be paid for by the government or by other entities who want to serve the specific, catchment of communities. The other important aspect is how can CBHI work with private insurance companies? Now, private insurance can provide reinsurance to the CBHI. The other way is that private insurance can actually cover for risk, which is at a higher level, like for higher healthcare expenditures. So say, for example, community insurance could cover up to a limit of 100,000 rupees. Anything above that, it could be transferred to the insurance companies. This would also take care of the premium and the contribution by the community. I'd just like to share experience of USAID. We tried a model where we worked with an insurance company and an NGO to provide healthcare services through a risk protection mechanism to urban population in a select geography. Now here, the demand for the product was supposed to be generated by the NGO, and they were supposed to be linked to the government provided health insurance program, and the hospital cash benefit for loss of wages and other expenses, non-medical expenses, were to be covered under this insurance program. It did not succeed, but it has left us with very important learnings. One is on the NGO side, there was a lack of operational clarity in terms of, what is their role versus what is the role of the insurance company. The other important factor was there's a lot of fear of losing credibility if the claims get rejected. And they were also not able to put up the initial cost, the setup cost that was required to be put up by the NGO. On the provider side, there was a problem of getting the right kind of provider mix, because the community has certain requirements in terms of their healthcare needs, their preferences, physical access. So, there was not a good mix of these providers because it was select facilities that the NGO was working with. And with the insurance side, there was a problem of pricing the product because there's not enough data which is available to help do this. And even if you are able to price it well, how do you decide on the affordability? Because you're reaching out to a very small catchment of population and you need to scale it up further. So those were some of the challenges we saw, and we feel that these could be addressed, but it needs to be really designed very carefully. And I'm sure Shelagh will talk more about these issues in his presentation. Coming to some of the challenges, there are innumerous challenges, and of course, because of that, it's not been able to be scaled up rapidly. But some of the important ones are, one is financial sustainability, and the other is scale up. Now, in terms of financial sustainability, data from different countries, like for example, in Senegal shows that 30% of the admissions to the hospital were of the members who were covered under CBHI, but their payments contributed to only 2.5% of the hospital revenues. Most of the mutuals, like 9 out of 10 in Latin America, had to be supported through grant mechanism. And even otherwise, we know that mutual is not a formal business line. And therefore, it has to depend on cross-subsidization with other products, or they have to depend completely on grant support. And what we have seen is that mutuals also have, and I'm sure Shaila will talk about it, is a good plan, business plan, but it takes a couple of years to sustain, and then only we can talk about scaling up. Now, one of the important things that could be done is to achieve scale. But how do we do this is by leveraging with the microfinance institutions, with cooperatives. We have more than 600,000 cooperatives in India, almost 36 million micro, small and medium enterprises, and 268 microfinance institutions. So these could be the vehicle to sort of expand, which can actually provide an entire ecosystem for providing healthcare services and reaching out to almost 250 million members who could be covered. Along with their family members, it would be much more. The other ways of risk mitigation could be bundling the products. So instead of having a standalone health product, bundle it with other insurance products like assets and crop and other things, but also bundle it with savings and loan, different forms of loans that people need. And a very important aspect is about reinsurance that I mentioned earlier, but it's extremely important for the community-based insurance to have a collective access to reinsurance. Regulatory and capital requirements are other limitations, and I'm sure Madam Alumelu and Shaila will talk more about it. But thanks to the standalone microinsurance company committee, in which I think all of you were a part of, which made some very good recommendations. And if we are able to bring down the capital requirement for the microinsurance companies and implement the other recommendations like having transparency, accountability, strong technology support, as well as microinsurance development funds, I think it's going to be really a big boost for the community-based health insurance. There are some other important considerations which we should not miss out. One is when you scale up, the mutuals or the community-based insurance would lose connection with the communities. And that's the worry of, how do you scale it up? And therefore, it has to be done very carefully. So while one can think of federalization of CBHIs, bringing them all under one umbrella, guided through standard protocols and regulations, and providing them with extensive support on underwriting, claims management, risk assessment, it should also allow for flexibility of designing products and customized products for the communities that they are reaching out to. One more thing is that we should connect it or collaborate with the government, but should not bring it under the government purview, because when government scales, they scale up rapidly. And this is not what we want when we are dealing with the communities, because we need to keep that social capital at the center and the needs, their decision making, their ownership at the center. The other opportunity is definitely technology, huge opportunities, whether it is artificial intelligence, whether it could be digitization of the entire processes, whether it is the new thing, the wearables, where it captures health information for behavior change, or whether for underwriting processes. But one of the limitations of technology is it may not penetrate down to the most vulnerable population. But I am very hopeful. India is, has a lot of startups and a lot of solutions. So hopefully we'll have cost-effective solutions reaching out to the most vulnerable population. It would be not right to say that, all of this could happen all by itself. We definitely need all the stakeholders to play a very important role in supporting the scale up of CBHIs. And here I would definitely call out, donors, philanthropists, CSRs, who need to provide the grant support for CBHIs, at least in the initial 3 to 5 years. We need policymakers, government, and regulatory authorities to provide conducive environment for the CBHIs to grow. As I mentioned, we need startups for good solutions, but we also need training institutions like Insurance Institute of India, National Insurance Academy, to build up the evidence. It's really sad that we do not have good evidence on community-based health insurance in India. One is to create that evidence. The other is also to provide extensive training, because these small organizations cannot get training automatically, right? So we need these institutions to support that. And definitely financial institutions, both insurance companies, insurtechs, banks could play a very important role by allowing for larger distribution and risk mitigation measures. I would like to end my observations by making one comment that we need, in India, we have a pluralistic health system. While it's fine, we can have multiple purchasers and multiple providers of healthcare. What is important is all of this needs to be guided through one set of guidelines. Community-based health insurance, private insurance, or government insurance should all be the means of accessing services from this one health system, which is heterogeneous, but guided. Because if we have a system meant only for poor, that system is going to be poor, and we do not want that. So to enable us achieve universal health coverage, as you mentioned, Dr. Moore, I think CBHI has a very important role to play, especially to provide services to the ones who need it the most, but who have been left out. Thank you.
Ma'am, thank you very much. This was a wonderful overview of the set of issues that you provided us. The message I'm taking away before I turn to Mr. Shelagh, just to articulate one, is that around the world, this is an industry that has had literally hundreds of years of existence and experience in different contexts and in multiple countries. This is not just a small idea that Shelagh cooked up in his head one day when he thought it was a good idea, but that this is a mature industry that has done. And what you're saying is it does have an opportunity to offer some of the solutions for the problems that we are looking at. But one message I did pick up, and just to make sure that I didn't get it wrong, is that some degree of formalization or formal recognition. I can think right now of the work Reserve Bank did with self-help groups, because self-help groups were given in some ways, it's a matter of how you interpret it, but a deemed banking license, because they were allowed to collect deposits from members, and they were allowed to place their aggregated deposits with a bank. If you look carefully, that's a banking function. But the Reserve Bank recognized that without that, the movement would not grow. And the results were just astounding. You saw state after state, region after region, the movement actually grew. And many of the things that you're speaking about, like formalization, training, digitization, it gives confidence to outsiders, investors, donors to jump in and say, okay, this is a formal part of the system. I'm not supporting some side activity, but something that the regulator and the system recognizes. Is that, or do you see that even informally, the market can grow? It would be good to hear your perspective on that. Just one aspect. How important is formalization?
Absolutely. I think formalization is very important. And as I mentioned, all of these regulatory systems and especially support on monitoring, on, how do they do the risk assessment. So all of that should be guided. but there should be flexibility to design the products with the community, because I think the whole value of CBHI is that they are closer to the community, they understand the community needs. So in terms of what should be the service package and how should you sort of rate them, the actuarial support can come from outside. But that discussion or conversation that happens with the community, that should not be lost, because what is applicable for tribal populations, say in Andhra Pradesh, may be very different from the requirements in Jharkhand. So we should formalize the sector, but we shouldn't over prescribe or over standardize.
Thank you very much, ma'am. It's really wonderful to hear your perspective. Let me turn to Mr. Shailab. Mr. Shailab, through Uplift Mutuals and your other work, you've been really one of the pioneers of this movement in India. And over the years, you have sustained this movement, you have built on it, and in some ways explored many aspects that, Dr. Rao touched on of this. And it would be wonderful to hear from you. What is this thing called CBHI? Many of us have heard of it, are aware of it, but don't know the specifics of it. Through your eyes, it would be good to know what it is. How can this help? Because as Dr. Rao mentioned, we've got a journey to go in the financial protection space. And while I do see what she's saying about partnering with government, unfortunately, government programs, including government-funded insurance, fall under the same envelope of government resources, which are limited. And in fact, what we are trying to do is to understand how can we organize better money that the government is not spending, but that people are spending through this mechanism. And how can policy, regulation, other ways we can help you? Because some of the issues, maybe are constrained by the Act. Even the IRDAI is constrained by the Act itself. There's not, of course, the Act can be changed, and at the end of the day, many things are possible. But if you think of it in two stages, given the current Act, what can policy do? What can regulation do? And of course, if the Act can be changed, how would it make a difference? Would it make a difference, or would, actually, simply you got better policy, you might be able to move forward? So, let me, with many of these questions, turn it over to you.
Thank you, Dr. Moore, and pleased to be here. I think we are 116 of us on this webinar, so very happy to see this.
Yeah, that's only the panelists here. There is a whole YouTube live
okay,
that doesn't track this. So
okay.
I'm expecting at least that much, because we had a very large number of registrations, so they will be all over the place.
Very happy to be here, and many points that Neeta touched upon. I have some counter arguments on that, and to start very basic, what is CBHI? I think CBHI is a very large jargon. It has many things into it, and the one thing that we know is practiced worldwide is mutuals and cooperatives, where a cooperative like Amul can set up its own health insurance and give it to its own members, holds the risks itself and manages by itself. That simply is what CBHIs look like, if you really want to define it in a very basic manner. Mutuals and cooperative insurance, so there is a difference which is not very well distinguished, but in cooperatives, you share the profit with members. In mutuals, you mostly keep the profit in the company itself. That's the basic difference between mutual and cooperative insurance. But at the end of the day, they retain the risk. They don't transfer it. That's the one thing. And in doing so, they're both liable for profit as well as losses. So if a loss happens, members pool more and manage the shortfall, or they decide on taking less claims. So that's how the CBHIs are defined. Now, in India, we had mutuals before independence. It's something that has existed before independence, and in fact, till 2015, we had the Calcutta Hospital Nursing Mutual still in existence. It was one of the companies that was allowed by the IRDA to exist. though it was not meant for the low income population, it was meant for the high level gentry. So in that sense, mutual is people becoming their own insurance providers and taking the risk. I'll just use 3 slides to show what we do at Uplift to give you a better sense of what I'm talking about. Let me share my screen. Yeah. So when we talk about mutuals, and specifically the model that Uplift has been working with different communities in Pune, and we started from Pune with Annapurna and Parvati. There are 3 aspects to it. One is people-led governance. Second is focus on health, not on hospitalization. And third is technology. I'll come through all that. So typically, when we talk about a mutual model, that it is governed by members. So right from designing the product to deciding on the claims, members take part in it. And the way we have experienced this over the last 18 years is that it takes time to do this, but once it is set, it also gives huge dividends in terms of trust, in terms of transparency, in terms of ownership. What you're seeing are basically pictures of women managing this. The first picture is from Rajasthan. The second is from our AGM, where community leaders are taking an oath for managing the claims committee and things like that. The second aspect of mutuals is that they're generally inclusive. People who will otherwise not get health insurance are taken care of by the mutuals. So there is an interesting incident when we when we started in 2004, along with my co-founder, French actuary, we had no precedence of designing a product like that. So we said, okay, let's take what is there in the formal market, and they had age-based premiums. And a week before that, I had taken a session with these women on ground, talking about principles of insurability, where one of the first principles is the control over the incident should be least, and that is insurable. When we took the product to the women and said, okay, from 18 years to 25, this premium, 25 to 40, this premium, and after 65, no entry kind of model, they said, you just told us that, the control over the incident by the insured should be least, that is insurable. Do we control our age? That kind of wisdom that has constantly come from the ground has been the driver of how we have led product design and development. And I think that's one thing that we can work with insurance companies, with other stakeholders, to give those insights that are completely missing. The products are mostly, you take a shelf product, you reduce the premium and give it to them. There are very few long tail studies on product design that have been done. And this community is where, decision on product design, decision on how claims should be decided. So we took pains in training women from the slums, from the villages, in understanding how the product works, how mutuals can decide on claims. And let me tell you, we are very lucky, or we have been able to do this. Only time will tell this, but our fraud ratios are almost negligible. And I think that is a very big win when it comes to health insurance, because we all know how health insurance bleeds when fraud happens. COVID is a once in a century kind of thing, but health insurance has been a bleeding portfolio primarily because of this. There is a supply side fraud, there is a demand side fraud, and the insurer bleeds. So in what we have seen is that there are very strong business reasons as to why there should be a community model. And yes, they can cover a first layer or a second layer, but the higher insurance covers can be given by government or insurance companies, but there has to be a first line of defense. And that's where I'm talking about the people part. The second part that, and which again is very critical to, a people-driven model, is the focus on accessing healthcare. Because to be honest, Dr. Moore, all I have learned health insurance is about which hospital do you go to? Do you get outpatient care or not? And is there somebody to guide you to go to a hospital? If this happens, a lot of costs can be saved because India has multiple price points for the same treatment. You don't have bargaining capacity with large hospitals. You do not have the primary healthcare system really working to its best, where people can go and the hospitalization rates will automatically come down. So when we designed this product, our focus was, can we provide value for money? Why should a woman who earns 2,000, 4,000 that time, 2004 I'm talking about, pay even 200 rupees per person per year to cover insurance when she doesn't see value in it? And that's a question that we have been asked, that hame claim nahi mila to hamare paise ka kya hoga? So, that question, I think, is the crux of financial education, client education, whatever you want to call it, that I have to save for a risk is I think a long-term process. And people say that community-based models are not sustainable. Have we given them enough time? Have we given them enough infrastructure? Because I may be wrong, but I understand insurance companies take anywhere between 8 years to 10 years to break even. And whether they do or not, nobody knows, because there's so many mergers and acquisitions that keep happening. So the idea of a community-based model as a business model will make sense only when you understand what people want. If you try to sell a product to them, it's not going to work. What works is, and I'll give an example. We have this outpatient care covered in the product. We have a doctor on the phone who really works. He picks up the call at 1 a.m. in the night and tells the patient where to go. We do navigation support. And this is all offered by today insurance companies also. But if you see the level of trust people have in a mutual versus an insurance company, it's very different. And COVID has somewhere, while a lot of claims have been paid, 60,000 crores claims have been paid in COVID, it's still a very minuscule percent of people who could access insurance during COVID. So the idea of a mutual is that, why do you want to fall ill in the first place? And then go to a hospital and then cover it, because it's a never-ending, kind of hospitalization is not the answer to actually building this. You have to provide preventive care and you have to provide access to care. So that's something at Uplift we have built. We have massive outpatient care facility built into the product. And one of the reasons that we have survived, in 2004, in an ILO document, there were some 55 schemes recorded. And they have all vanished because, the focus on being able to run this properly is missing. And this value for money is very important. And the third aspect that I would like to talk about is where Uplift distinguishes itself from a lot of other community-based experiments is the design of technology embedded into the system. So from day one, we told the women that, look, this is money that belongs to all of us. We cannot spend it the way we want it. There needs to be a system in place. So the product was underwritten by an actuary. There were rules and regulations that were supposed to be made. And you could only change those rules and regulations once the product period was over, which was after a year. And claims decision where, we could discuss that, okay, so many claims have come in. This is the money that is there in the pot. This is how we take discussions. So typically an underwriter would check the claim, but the community would decide on it. And I think this is one of the major factors where we have differentiated ourselves, is that, data-driven decision-making is something. So community is not a romantic idea for us. It's a very serious business, and we have to make sure that we are able to, pay for the claims. And if we cannot, there has to be the data of how much money is there is transparently available. And one of the things that we did, about scale, the loss of mutuality at scale, it's something that has been bothering me also, because we have set up mutuals with different communities, and they have been very localized. So how do you create something that, can be scaled up across the country? And I think the way India is changing in terms of payment mechanisms, in terms of other digitization that is happening, the same thing could happen in a mutual model, where we are now offering mutual as a digital platform. Communities can use that to set up their mutual, and you can have members across the country. You do not need to be localized. And it's a question of intent. If you really want to have a governance model that that is transparent and that is representative of what is happening, it can be done. And we are working in this area. We are trying to set up now a completely digitally native product for gig economy workers. We're trying that for truck drivers. And there is a demand for a lot of products which commercial insurance today does not. I don't think they even think about us. For us, we are a forgotten class for insurance companies, to be very honest. It's the IRDA that keeps pushing them that do this, do this, do this. Otherwise, we are a forgotten class for the insurance companies. So in that sense, I think, mutuals, community, cooperative insurance, as long as they are given the space, and I think one of the reasons we have not been able to scale is not our own limitations. Yes, there will be challenges, but is the access to reinsurance. I cannot underwrite a risk outside in the open market when I know that I may not be able to, pay for the claims if my claim ratio goes above 100%. So, and that's something that people also see, large organizations, large MFIs do not want to work with us because they simply say that, oh, if something goes wrong, RBI will take an action on them. So the issue of reinsurance hits very close to us, in terms of scaling up, and whether it is through an insurance company or the regulator creates something that works for us is a question for future. But I think if we are not able to answer what is happening through COVID, because we have seen these claims coming in COVID from a particular class of people. There is a vast population of India that has really gone to the, I don't like using that, but gone to the dogs. People don't have money to eat. They don't have money to buy medicines. They don't have money to go to even a doctor. For 1 year, they have, postponed taking medicines and going to the doctor. So I think, and the data that is that in an hour, 7,000 people fall into poverty. So by the time this thing will be over, 7,000 people would have fallen into poverty. So I think there is an urgency, and that urgency needs to be taken into account when we are thinking about it. That while Ayushman Bharat, schemes like the large government schemes are there, I think, there is a place for everything. And as I said, the first layer of defense is where mutuals come in. If we had a mutual model across the country, communities could have accessed, better care. They could have been guided as to where they have to go. This mayhem that happened in COVID, migration, the workers' migration, all those things, I think we could have somewhere reduced it. So in that sense, I think CBHIs can, or mutual or cooperative insurance can play a very large role. And to come to the point of the second question of yours, how does this fit in the larger set of things? I think we need to have a space for mutual and cooperative insurance. I think India as a country has done well on the banking side, because we have so many varieties in banking now. We earlier had only banks. Today we have almost 10, 11 entities who could do banking kind of operations. Similarly, in insurance, we feel that mutual and cooperative is one way, the provider model is another. And last year, 2 years back, a lot of people approached me after this or what was happening in China, the mutual aid model. Millions of people onboarded on the thing, and everybody was like kicked about, let's do something like this. I think that also is a bit, extreme, because just copying what China does is not going to work here. But I feel that there has to be a balance in terms of giving a recognition that these kind of models can coexist with what the government is trying to do, what the private insurers are doing. And, we can be a third party, third model in the two-way model that is existence right now, where we can handle the first layer of risk, which is manageable, which is what Neeta was talking about, primary care, access to hospitals, this kind of thing can be taken off by us. And I think the current policy well, we don't have a space for in the current policy as a regulated entity. That is definitely there. But and the partner agent models have, if they were working, all MFIs would be doing health insurance. If I'm not wrong, most of the large MFIs have stopped working with insurance companies, stopped providing health insurance. They do only credit insurance. And one way or the another, people are trying to do something on their own. There is a large informal system that is developing just behind this, and I feel that if one thing goes wrong, all of us will be treated with the same stick. So that's a danger that I would say exists. But as a potential, I think we have about 500 million people to be reached out. Straightforward, that's the total addressable market that can be taken care of. And models like this, yes, data is something we need to share data publicly, so that there can be a monitoring of what is happening. We just can't exist like that. But beyond that, I think mutuals, if they are given the right infrastructure investment, the way it happens with an insurance company, I think mutual and cooperative insurance can also do very well. And there are only two cooperatives insurance models in India. One is Vimoseva, the other one is IFCO Tokyo, and they're doing exceptionally well. So my point is that if we bring insurance in this country through cooperatives, through mutuals, I think we will do a much better job of penetrating that.
Thank you, Mr. Shelagh, for that very clear articulation of what you do, what the issues are, what the challenges are. I certainly learned a lot from listening to you. Some messages I'm getting from you, just to make sure I understood them well. One, this issue of financial viability. Your view seems to be, if given enough time, if given enough opportunity, that is fundamentally not a problem. Communities value this. They are willing to pay what is needed.
Yes.
And with the development of technology and many other things, costs can be controlled in ways. And also the point you're making is that there is a lot of, what I had said in terms of value loss. There's a lot of value loss in terms of coordination of care, in terms of where to go, where not to go, which in a sense raises cost for the customer. If the customer sees a player like you partnering with them to do it, that cost actually comes down. And combining that with what Dr. Rao said, between the two of you, what I'm hearing you say is that CBHI does offer an opportunity to reach a large community. There is a history around the world of it. In India, there are a few exceptions that have done it, but really that's partly because regulation hasn't allowed it to standalone entities. What you're saying is a cooperative like Amul has no restriction. They can go ahead and do what is appropriate, because the reason that they came together, the purpose was not insurance, but something else, which then allows them to do other things. But let me stay with this notion a little bit of this formalization in India. One of the directions to have gone, while I would submit to you that microfinance and these variations in models do exist, remember, these are all lenders. These are all entities that are taking a risk on the customer. The customer is not taking a risk on them, except somewhat indirectly, right? And it is true that the cooperative banks have existed in India for a long time, but I will say to you that the experience there has been somewhat mixed and cautionary. That deposits of institutions that were smaller, while I'm sure there are high quality cooperative banks out there are also many, sadly, that are perhaps not as high quality. And any other regulator wanting to go in this direction will say, the experience is not as consistent as it was, suggested it might be. So, I can see the hesitation, even assuming all the stars are aligned and everybody is interested, to go full distance. I was a member of SAMI. I certainly believe that the 100 crore requirement is inconsistent with the world. It's not simply, it's excessively cautionary, because Europe is 15 crores. For regular insurance, not micro insurance. Regular and micro insurance is even lower. So perhaps that's a debate one can have. But if we were to say, let's not go there. One thing you mentioned is access to reinsurance. Right? Now, is there something you can explore with us there, that without a standalone insurance, without a capital regulation changing, because that anyway act needs to change, are there other ways in which potentially, a IRDA itself acting in its own capacity, making regulation, making rules, can allow something like this that would help, that would be helpful to you?
Yeah, I think so. There can always be a model where you bring in investors or donors to, because there is this development impact bond model, there is this social impact investors. You can bring them in and they could hold the ground till the investor is convinced that, this model is viable, because at the end of the day, the regulator is looking at, whether we are being able to honor the claims or not. That's one aspect. But the investment that has to go in setting this up, I think the market has not been created, Dr. Moore. I think we are just, doing bits and bits of experiment here and there in India. There is no formal development of a market that requires this kind of investment. I think the regulator was, very kind in making that foray into microinsurance, but the development of the market is not available. And I think there is definitely a chance that donors and investors can set up this fund on which they can take a bet on the community risk models. And I think development impact bond kind of models can actually make a mutual model show that it can work at scale.
So you're saying this is more, as an investor, as a donor, one can do. I was also curious to understand, before I turn to Madam Almelu, are there policy issues from the regulator that can help? Like you said, this direct access to reinsurance and other things, even without donor support, because one of the challenges with donors and impact investors, you won't get the kind of volumes you need. You speak about 500 million people, I'm talking about 10 lakh crores. That kind of capital will not come from donors, will not come from, investors right now. They will put it into bigger insurance companies. If you see the frenzy that surrounds buying of large insurance companies, that kind of frenzy will not come to CBHIs for a long time.
True. No, I think the regulator can set up a fund which can be accessed by mutuals. If the regulator wants to do something like that, they can set up a fund which can work as a backstop fund, where they could identify certain organizations that are willing to test this out in a POC kind of model. It can be done. It can be done. The regulator can also bring that comfort.
Thank you, Mr. Jalab. Let me turn for the final word to Madam Almelu. Madam, you have really brought about a lot of changes in the insurance system under your tenure, and clearly you can see, you saw the work that was done in COVID. There's a real gap in the system today, aside from the numbers. There is a need for us to get much further than we have. Even countries like South Africa, almost 40% of the market is insurance-led market. We are really at 6%, 6.5%, really quite small in a very essential function. Of course, this is a conversation about CBHIs, so we will talk about CBHIs, we will get your views on CBHIs. But since we don't always get your time, I thought maybe ask you a more broader questions as well. Yes, CBHI would love to hear your views. One thing that I've heard from both panelists is that there is a potential here. How much it is, we don't know yet, because we haven't really allowed it the full play. I recognize that the Act prevents some things from happening. But for example, is it possible? One of the issues that I hear from ground level players is that the design of insurance products that are needed by the community, the way insurance needs to be managed, the mainstream insurance companies are not as interested in that. They want a more standard, kind of idea. Is it possible? It has been done in pensions, it has been done in other industries, where IRDAI directly acknowledges either a self-regulatory organization that we set up for CBHIs, like we have done for microfinance, and says that if you are a part of this SRO and you are monitored and mentored by them, I will not call you an insurance company because I can't. That the Act does not allow me. But I will allow you to design your own products. You can submit it to me via the SRO for approvals. And if I approve it, then you can start talking to reinsurers and insurers parallel. You don't need necessarily for insurers to file again the product. I mean, I'm just making up something. Is that possible? But even if, let's say, this is not possible broadly, where do we go from here, ma'am? Is, my work is in universal healthcare. I'm trying desperately to find a mechanism. I am certainly writing, you might have seen, madam, as much as I can to try and persuade governments to come up with more money. And there is no question, we need more money from them. Even the schemes that we spoke about, PMJY and all that, they are just 0.1, 0.05% of GDP. I mean, you need those schemes to be 40 times larger if indeed we are going to have a substantive impact through those schemes. I think right now we have the private market. We all are spending our own money, largely speaking, middle income, lower income people. So, any ideas that you have as to what IRDA is thinking about over the next 5 years, both CBHI related as well as anything else that we can get from you, ma'am. Over to you, ma'am. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Moore. And it's been really a revelation listening to both Dr. Neeta Rao and Mr. Shailab Kumar. Opens up a lot of new vistas of thinking. So really happy to be part of this team talking to all of you. First thing is, I mean, before I come to your how do you design products which people are wanting but not getting, I'll just tell you that the regulator has always been sensitive. I think from the time it was set up, it's been sensitive to have this inclusive group getting all sorts of insurance. All of you must be aware that right in the beginning, in 2005 itself, there was a micro insurance regulation which got amended in 2015, which allowed, of course, not as insurance companies, but it allowed everybody, whether it's a SHG or NGO, MFI, cooperative banks, rural banks, BCs, all of this entire, gamut could come in as a distribution network. Of course, there were issues that, some of them did have a little bit of bad experience, but I think that will be there in any personal insurance scheme. If the moment there is a personal insurance scheme, there will be some issues always, but we had opened up, or we have opened up this as a distribution channel. You were saying cost of distribution is high because unless we remunerate all these people, like all these BCs or NGOs, a little higher, they are not going to, do the marketing for you. So, but the amount fixed was, I think, about 15%. So we had that vast, we still have that vast network of people who are called as micro insurance agents and who can sell micro insurance policies. There are some very low sum insured set for them, like 2 lakhs in life insurance, 1 lakh in health, and about, say, if it's in health, if it's a family or a group, the sum insured becomes 2.5 lakhs. And for property, it is 1 lakh. And for a scheme like Fasal Bima Yojana, it is whatever it is. There's no cap on the sum insured. So this has been done by the regulator. And one small statistics I would like to share with you is in life business as of 2021, about 9 crores 76 lakhs of people have been covered under micro insurance scheme. The number of people who benefited because life insurance, the death claims, about 6,71,000 people have, or 6,72,000 people have got death claims amounting to some 2,300 crores, which is, I think, fairly a good amount. So we do have micro insurance regulations, and any regulations which we make, and which I'm sure all of you are aware, it's not like, it's cast in stone. We keep trying to change. If there is some change needed, it happens. It takes time, but we do keep changing it so that, we are not in some prehistoric age and the society has, or the community has moved forward. So that's one thing. And for the easier understanding of the consumers, what has happened, it coincided with the, I can say, onset of the COVID, was standard products. Today, the market has about 3,500 varied products: life, non-life, property, health, a whole lot of products, and each one has its own, peculiarities. So there's literally a big confusion even for an educated, if I can say, middle class person to go choose something which he thinks he should buy for himself or his family. So that's how this concept of standard products have come in. We have standard products now in health. It started with what is called as Arogya Sanjeevani. The idea of a standard product in health was Arogya Sanjeevani. In life, you have Saral Bima, Jeevan Bima, which is a pure term product, and another one is a pension or annuity. And in small householders and small, for the small scale industries, up to 5 crore sum insured, and the other one is 50 crore sum insured per location. So we standardized the terms, conditions across all these policies, and we have mandated that insurance companies have to sell these without tweaking anything. The only thing they are allowed to do is change in price, so that there is a comfort product for somebody to buy. And we also hope that these products will become the benchmark. I mean, slowly we will get there. Right now, it cannot happen overnight. All these products will become basic. You cannot have a product which has lesser benefits than any of them. It should be built on, it should be better, so that somebody who wants minimal is taken care of when they purchase these standard products. So to some extent we have tried, since it's just starting. The takeoff is, it's yet to happen to the scale at which we expected. And added to this, the pandemic woes are also there. It's not happening as it should, but definitely in a product like COVID specific, sales have been there. But I can tell you, I agree with all of you that the number of claims, though I may say that X number of claims got reported, and out of that 90%, 86% got settled. But considering the number of the incidences which have happened in COVID, it's minuscule. The people who have got the insurance protection, it's minuscule. We can't, it's then that you start really thinking whether what's happening to the rest of the population. Some of them got taken care of in some state scheme, some got taken care of in probably PMJY. But I think vastly 80% were completely without any cover. They have lost all their probably savings, what little they saved. They have sold their family silver, so to say, to come out of this crisis. And they are, all of us, the entire economy is much worse off than it was, before this crisis. So we definitely, these issues are there, but we have tried to, apart from having specific micro insurance regulations, we have tried to make specifically, since we are talking of health insurance, we have tried to make health insurance more transparent, more simple, made it to some extent, sort of straight jacketed, that you have to put, you have to cover this, this, if your exclusion is this. We have even gone into, defining the wordings of the exclusions, defining certain of the jargon or certain terms which was always a matter of controversy. It still could may not be, the final word on it. Probably after some more experience, it's still the definitions need to be redefined. Like, for example, pre-existing disease is always a bone of contention. What is pre-existing, what is not, and how insurers do take different positions, but we have tried to make it uniform, saying that this is how you have to define. But despite that, I think lots of ground has to be covered by the insurance industry, and definitely this is a big advantage for them, that they can use all this to make health insurance a more friendly sort of a product. Today it's usually, insurance is associated with something which is not very friendly. Insurers are associated with something, okay, if it's compulsory and mandatory, I have to take it. Somebody is telling you, have to take it, I take it. Otherwise, better to avoid and go to Shailab to take something which he offers. Because when you are in a community, probably you have that more closeness and talk to each other, get to know how to solve those problems, majorly the health problems. But in insurance, everybody is in their own, so to say, in their own silos. So one policy holder is not able to speak to the other. And I think that's where this community-based health insurance will make a huge difference, because that is what is required. People need to talk and get to know, which was really highlighted during this COVID time. A helpline setup or a FAQ, we made all the insurers put FAQs and set up helplines for COVID patients. And I think that worked well, but it is only for a short duration for a particular disease. So this has to become more broad-based. Now, coming to this products, what you had asked, whether, uplift, like institutions can come straight to the regulator, get the products approved. At present, we don't have that sort of framework, but there are two ways it can be done. One is being there from, I can say, 2016. Somehow, I don't know why insurers don't take advantage of it, or they have not, marketed it, so to say. Is there is something called a pilot product. They can file a pilot product with us. That means they can tailor make a product as required by a particular group of people. If it need not be a formal group, we don't have to call it a group. I mean, say 100, it could be an individual product which will sell to that group, because now I don't want to get into technicalities here. We have defined what is group, and one sort of restriction is you cannot form a group to give insurance. So that also may not happen. So you have a group like what Dr. Neeta Rao was saying, say the tribals in Andhra Pradesh. They may require a certain product. It can be sold individually to each of the tribals. So you make that product. It could also have, extent products may be excluding, but you will want to include certain things in that product, or you want to do a completely different product. You can do it, but it will have to be with an insurance company. And if it is filed with us, we will call it a pilot product, give you the product for a year, and you can experiment it up to 5 years. You can come to us. I mean, every year probably we will ask the progress of that, how that particular product is behaving. And if it works fine, 5 years it works fine, it gets mainstreamed. So this has not been used much at all. This is where you can do innovation, you can do any sort of product and come to the regulator. On the other hand, I mean, the past year or so, all of you would have read about the regulatory sandbox which we had initiated. That is little shorter term. Again, in fact, I had been telling all insurers that they should partner with the technology firm or with the cooperative or, like Uplift. Partner with them, and you come with some innovation which we can put in the sandbox. It's for 6 months, experiment and see. If it's good, then and if it's benefiting the whole lot of policy holders on whom you have done this, if the outcomes, we have asked them that in the beginning itself, you should tell us that, this is the measurement of the outcome. If it happens, fine, we can really think of making it the normal product. But somehow, in that regulatory sandbox, we have had extremely good response. Lot of response. Probably it's the way to go also, that initially and even now in the first window, second window, lot of wearable devices. Many insurers have experimented with wearable devices, and going by the outcome, decided to give a discount or decided to give a better cover. They have done with all this, but it can become a much bigger canvas to experiment on these products. So on the community-based health insurance, like I was saying, it is probably the need in India, where it always gives a comfort that it has happened across other parts of the world. It gives a comfort if in a group, you suppose there's a group of diabetics. I think this was done, if I remember, in Malaysia, diabetics or cancer patients. That group, they form a group, and that group is insured. So first thing is they are able to compare notes. They are able to give each other some sort of advices or that psychological support. And in that particular policy, it was for cancer patients. They were getting much lower rates as far as medicines were concerned, treatment was concerned, and it made sense for the insurance company to do it like that. So I mean, and it was after knowing these people had contracted cancer. So even with that, the insurance companies were happy with that sort of experiments. So community-based experiments is definitely welcome. In fact, we have to see every type of insurance. See, today, mutual, like what Shailab said, it was available till 2015. When the act amended, I really do not know the background, but somehow mutual was removed. Cooperatives are still there. But cooperatives, the barrier, of course, is the capital. It's still there. It is with 100 crores. So the report has been given. Dr. Moore was part of the report. Shailab Kumar had also given his views. That report, we are examining it, but till the amendment of the act and till we go forward the way it is stated in the report, it could take time. It could have come with a lot of other there could be other issues also. But today's situation, there are a lot of enabling regulations which will help in going further. I mean, I had told you about the distribution channels available, the micro regulations which are very proactive. And one more suggestion which Dr. Neeta Rao gave was on bundling of products. So bundling of products is also allowed. The life and non-life insurers can partner with each other and give a bundle product. Apart from that, the non-life insurer, suppose he's covering a farmer, along with the crop insurance, his livestock, his dwelling, personal accident, health insurance, all could be bundled. And his convenience should be, it should be a one-stop shop with the one insurance company and not deal with whole lot of people. It should be one-to-one. Once that is there, there's a lot of trust. I can just relate one small, experiment which we carried out when I was in agriculture insurance company, where non-loany farmers, we wanted to enroll a lot of non-loany farmers. So we asked the CSCs in the state to help us out in this. So the CSCs, they didn't, I believe that it was a big success, especially in Maharashtra, where huge lot of farmers are non-loany farmers. We had a huge success in a lot of pockets of Maharashtra because we told them that you can come through the CSC. And CSC is a trusted person. He is in his village. He knows X is guy I can catch hold of if I don't get my claim. So they all went to the CSCs. In fact, we have the cutoff dates. The Kharif season, we'll say July 31st. After that, we know they will see the sky and they know the weather, what's happening. So there is a cutoff date. And in fact, I got a call that the queue is so huge, extended by 2 days, so that they are able to file in their application and get themselves covered. Then at that time, it set me thinking that, see, it's not only he needs for his crop, but he will need for the whole lot of other things. And probably it is a CSC or an ASHA worker whom they will trust more than a typical insurance agent or an insurance agency. So probably today, with the sort of regulations which we have and the amount of freedom we have given to the intermediaries, that should be the first step to increase this business. I heard both of them, and I heard you also saying that issues in claims, I think that needs to get sorted out. Usually, people are not very much aware, but uh, aware about the claim procedure, claim how to make it. I think that sort of formalities are becoming little less now. With more cashless coming in, with more providers providing cashless treatment, so probably uh, claim settlement will take on a different hue than what filling a form, giving a form, getting check of all the bills. I think it will be different because the way we are doing now is different. That is also allowed. So maybe some tweaks in the system, some talking to the insurance companies, that would help in expanding this community-based uh, health insurance. Um, I think these are some of the thoughts I thought I will share with you. And if you have any more, questions, willing to answer that.
Thank you, Madam Alamilu. You've always been open to ideas, open to discussion, and I can see from your remarks even now that you're constantly trying to think about how to streamline, how to yet stay within regulation, stay within prudence, make sure it's a sensible step forward. So I really appreciate that kind of balancing.
One more thing I forgot. One more thing I wanted to tell is today, again, largely insurance, I think both of you said again, is largely hospitalization. So probably there are few insurance companies who are slightly experimenting with OPD. They are slightly experimenting with home treatment, but most of them are still with tertiary care. I think that people need to move out of that that framework. We have encouraged, like Corona Rakshak gives you home care treatment. We have told insurers you can give as add-on now. Wherever you feel like, you give an add-on for home care treatment because that is what is required. For the lot of policy holders in COVID haven't got any claims because home care is not covered. And uh, I'm not justifying I'm just saying the insurer never ever dreamt, forget none of us ever dreamt the situation of the COVID. So they have never priced for a home care. So they couldn't, even if they wanted to help, if they have started converting everything and looked at as hospitals, they would have had a challenge in doing that. But to the extent that, the government had said all these temporary hospitals, telemedicine, that we had asked the insurers that you should allow that. So there is a huge scope for including, for expanding by the insurance companies in, OPD, in home care treatments, and how it gets structured, because we have seen mushrooming of these home care treatment sort of companies. Either they are manufacturers of the oxygen cylinder or something, or the ventilators, or sometimes the hospitals themselves have said we'll provide you all this at home, but this will be the per day cost. If it's including a ventilator, this is this much, with oxygen this is this much, and if you want to turn it into sort of ICU with nursing care 24 hours, it is this much. So this happened, all of you know, on the go in few months time. I think the insurance companies can also look at it and start thinking of covering all this.
Ma'am, thank you very much. It's wonderful to hear from you. We are almost out of time. What I thought I might do, instead of summarizing the discussion, go back to the other panelists, starting with Dr. Rao, just for a few closing remarks, ma'am. You've heard a wonderful discussion. Any thoughts you have, parting thoughts for Shelagh, for me, for Madam Alamelu, based on what you've heard so far?
Thank you, Dr. Moore. And I think, first of all, this was a wonderful panel, and got to hear the community perspectives from Shelagh and about the insurance perspective, the regulatory perspective and insurance company perspective from Madam Alamelu. My takeaway is that there is definitely a huge opportunity to tap community-based health insurance, and Madam's comments on in terms of how this could be made flexible, and all regulations that are set up are with certain intent and with some background history because of which they are set up, but they are not set in stone and they could be changed. So I've been looking at a lot of the questions also is like, what is the key recommendation that's coming out here? I think the key recommendation should be like all the different stakeholders should actually come together and see what is the potential of reviving and scaling the community-based health insurance models so that it benefits the community. So my takeaway is, can be all different stakeholders come together and look at a solution that can be executed, that is practical. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Rao. That is a wonderful suggestion and something that we need to bring together and make happen. Mr. Shelagh, any parting thoughts from you?
Dr. Moore, I am pretty terrified right now because I wanted to, work on a model where we provide COVID insurance for truck drivers. And believe me, I am not getting good quotes. I do not know whether if I get an insurance company on board, whether the claims will be paid or not. And there is a huge reputation risk in, moving from a mutual to a partner agent model. So my thing is that, people need health insurance. Let's be very clear. And if we don't rise up to the situation, you already have said 10 lakh crores. I don't know, that's something that must be an estimate. It may be more than that. And what is happening to livelihoods because of that is irreparable. The expense is one thing, but so my point is only that if people are open to experimenting it further with certain guidelines, obviously, we should. Right now, the takeaway should be that let's experiment more on this. Let's understand where the sweet spot lies between, because IRDA has a D in it. It's a development agency also, not just regulator. So they are one of the foremost stakeholders interested in something like this. And I think if there is enough willingness to experiment on this, because in COVID, I have been asked by artisans group, by truck drivers group, give us insurance, because insurance companies are not ready to give them. Now I have a demand, I can meet it, but I'm terrified to do it. So my only request would be that, if we can facilitate some of these pilots, that would be lovely. Thank you.
Thank you all. It was a wonderful discussion. I agree with you that there is a long journey ahead. And what I'm hearing from Madam Alamelu is there is a willingness to experiment. There is a willingness to talk. No idea is an impossible idea. All ideas can be considered. And what Dr. Rao is saying is that, let us put our heads together. Maybe we can come up with ideas that are sensible, that can, I was in the RBI board for many years. You have to wear both hats. You can't, yes, D is important, but R is also important. You have to, because it's not a business in which we can only assume that everybody is a good person and they will all do the things that are right. Unfortunately, if things go wrong, people do come to the R and they forget about the D. And they say, you were the regulator. Why did you do? Why did you allow? Why did you not? So, we need to build something that is mature with something that is sensible. But I can hear in this group and from the questions, there's genuine enthusiasm and a recognition of the problem. I don't think anybody is saying that everybody is well insured. Why are you making noise? I didn't hear that. On the contrary, I heard that there is a large gap. Here are the steps we have taken so far. I really like Madam's idea of standardization, of making things simpler, because at the end of the day, while you're right, there are very poor people. The reality of India is, even pre-COVID, that if the global middle class line is $10 a day, 97% of Indians are not even middle class. So we are less poor and more poor. Middle class is 3% and less. Right? So it's a large problem. It's a large problem. So thank you all. It was wonderful to have you all and to stay so late for the discussion. We will, the Dwara research team will work more. We'll collaborate with all of you to try and figure this out. This is clearly a critical agenda. As Mr. Shelab said, livelihoods are getting impacted, lives are getting impacted, and at some level, growth is getting hurt because of the people of the country can't bounce back in the way that they need to. But I'm confident that given the group here, and I was in the IRDA group on standalone microinsurance, there was no message to me there that don't make unusual recommendations. The idea was make sensible recommendations that you think as a mature group we will consider, we will talk about it, and if they make sense, we will go ahead. So I can see that willingness. So thank you all, madam. Thank you, Dr. Rao. Thank you, Shelab. It's wonderful to have you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Moore.
Thank you very much.
Thank you,
Thank you, Dr. Moore.
Dwara Research.
Thank you, Dwara Research. Thanks.